So I was under the impression that fat people are stubborn, which perpetuates to their obesity. Yes, I know. I know. It sounds wild. I get it. But hear me out. You got to think healthy living requires a certain level of discipline. And different degrees of discipline for different healthy lifestyles. And obviously, for someone to be visibly unhealthy or visibly obese, it requires some sort of rejection to healthy alternatives of living, and a constant rejection. You could be doing this, but you'd rather choose this. People offer you this and you say no to that. You say no to this and you say no to that. No to this type of food and no to that type of food. And you only want this and you only want that. You only want to do things this way, and or you don't want to do anything at all. And it's a stubborn way of living. And so it leads me to question okay, so fat people must be stubborn. But I'm sadly mistaken. Apparently, I'm sadly mistaken. Because I was corrected that the stubbornness is a byproduct. It's a defense mechanism of a deeper psychological issue. Well, what is that deeper psychological issue? So basically, the stubbornness is a symptom and not necessarily the disease. So on my Facebook timeline, because my Facebook timeline is undefeated, some people quoted, here's one notable quote. As a beautiful woman, I am not stubborn. I'm on survival mode. Now, how could someone, she says she's not stubborn, she's on survival mode. How could someone who is unhealthy or visibly obese, be in survival mode? Apparently you're in a state of abundance if you're obese, right? You're getting an abundance of something in order for you to be obese. So how could you be in survival mode? But let's continue. When everybody thinks your body is a group project you didn't sign up for, you learn to stand 10 toes down. That's bars. What y'all call stubborn is really me protecting my peace, my snacks, and my sanity. I give them that. Okay, if you put it that way, okay, great. A group project that you didn't sign up for. I like that. The stubbornness is a symptom, not the disease, and the fat is just along for the ride, minding its business. Like some folks should be minding theirs. That was a shot. And I understand completely. And I think it's the same person or another person said it's a defense mechanism against all the unsolicited advice, side eyes, and quote unquote concerned comments we didn't ask for. And obesity, unlike any other disease, it's a social disease because it's a visible disease. You may or may not look healthy if you have a STD or STI or a terminal illness. You know what I mean? You could get by. You can put on whatever you need to put on to cover that up, to cover up those symptoms. But obesity, it's you can spot it from a distance. Not trying to be funny, but it just is what it is. So it's hard to hide. And so because of this, this mark, this mark that obese people wear becomes a shield, becomes an armor, and then ergo lies the stubbornness, right? Quote, the quote unquote help only helps when it's actually wanted, respectful, and doesn't come with judgment. Otherwise, it's like throwing salad at someone and expecting them to suddenly love kale. Ooh, I like the way they put that. Like throwing salad at someone and expecting them to suddenly love kale. It's the difference between saying, hey, do you want support? And saying, you're doing it wrong. Okay, I get that. Basically, good help is offered, not imposed, and it comes with snacks if possible. Shout out to that person. Kudos to them. So let's look at the psychological effects or the psychological reasonings behind a fat person being quote unquote stubborn. And I say quote unquote because, once again, the stubbornness is the symptom, not the disease. To merge these perspectives comprehensively, we must bridge the gap between physiology, psychology, and sociology. So let's get into the first talking point. Stubbornness as a psychological defense, the survival tool. When the term is applied to a person's behavior, the quotes suggest that stubbornness is actually self-protection disguised as defiance. Boundary setting, what is perceived as a refusal to listen, is often an individual defending their mental health from unsolicited advice, constant body surveillance, and the quote-unquote concern trolling. So this is what the young lady was referring to. The group project that you didn't sign up for, concern trolling. I like that. Autonomy versus control. People do not resist health. They resist being treated like a problem to be solved. When quote unquote help feels like an imposition or an intervention on one's dignity, a person naturally pushes back. In this framework, stubbornness equals a resistance to being controlled. And you know, that makes sense. I mean, you could call it stubborn, but it's just them being human. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're not being stubborn, they're just being human. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't ask, why are you in my face? The dignity factor. True change occurs when an individual feels safe and respected. If change is fueled by shame or external pressure, the resulting stubborn response is a symptom of emotional fatigue and a loss of agency. So so them just saying fuck it, I don't want to hear it, get out my face. I don't like, that's just them throwing their hands in the air. It's like they're tired of it. You know what I mean? And that's perfectly human. The impact of social stigma. This is number 2. The perception that fat people are inherently more stubborn is a byproduct of weight bias. Stereotyping. Cultural narratives frequently assign negative traits like laziness or lack of discipline to larger bodies. These stereotypes prime observers to interpret any boundary setting or biological plateau as moral failing. So basically, the group project that the fat person didn't sign up for is basically them saying you've failed at, like, you've societally and culturally failed because, you know what I'm saying, because of, you know, the way you look visibly, right? And so off rip, because externally to the person proposing the suggestions or whatever, the quote unquote help, off rip is coming from an ugly place. That's basically what it's saying. The cycle of shame. Treating fatness as evidence of a stubborn character increases stress. So it's like a chicken or the egg. Are fat people stubborn, or does the stubbornness make people fat? You know what I'm saying? Like, stubborn character increases stress and internalized stigma. This actually makes health goals harder to achieve, as it damages the person's relationship with their own autonomy and self-worth. So now, that's basically saying, like, a fat person has to go to the gym because everybody told them to go to the gym. Not because they want to be healthy or because they like going to the gym, but because...
When you see somebody who is in really good shape, there are a few conclusions you can draw about that person. 1, they're disciplined and they understand dedication. 2, they are patient and they understand commitment, because we know nothing just happens overnight, so they have to be patient with themselves in the process in order to see results. 3, that person is mentally tough. Life hits us with stress, our bodies get fatigued, we get sore, but they don't allow that to become an excuse to give up or to become inconsistent. And 4, they have self-love, because we know that anything that you love, you take care of, even down to the point of it being a sacrificial love, because when you love something, you also keep things away from it that could be harmful, like being gluttonous or alcohol consumption, etc. So when you see somebody who is in really good shape, you're not merely just observing something physical, but it's indicative that there are a lot of other good character traits underlying.
They were receiving external pressures, pressure and shame, pretty much. So that's the external factors. let's see, the double-edged sword of persistence. The rhetoric with fitness communities often reclaims stubbornness as a necessary virtue for success. So now here's a double-sided coin. There's negative stubbornness and then there's positive stubbornness. Just like anything, there's a light and a dark, right? So negative stubbornness, refusing to pivot away from a failing plan or clinging to habits that don't align with stated goals. Clinging to habits that don't align with, so that's a negative stubbornness. So you're too comfortable to change. That's basically what that says. Refusing to pivot away from a failing plan. So you're doing things, you're doing the this and the that, and you're doing all the things, and none of it is working. But it's comfortable to you. You know what I mean? And so, you cling to habits that don't align with your goals. That's a negative stubbornness. Positive stubbornness is the quote unquote dogged persistence required to overcome biological plateaus. To beat fat that is stubborn about staying, the individual must be stubborn about their consistency. So if you're doing the right things, you have to be stubborn about it. You have to be stubborn with yourself in order to overcome this. So basically what this is saying is that a fat person who is externally stubborn needs to internalize that stubbornness in order to overcome their fat, in order to overcome their unhealthy lifestyle, I should say. I'm not even talking about fat anymore. We're talking about lifestyle. In order to overcome an unhealthy lifestyle, they have to be just as stubborn with themselves as they are with the people treating them like a group project that they didn't sign up for, the concern trolling, so to speak. So let's give a little summary. So behaviorally, the person is being difficult or lazy, and to reframe that, the person is setting boundaries against unsolicited advice. So now, see, let me get through this. I'm gonna highlight this so I can talk about it. So yeah. Socially, fatness indicates a stubborn mind, but to reframe that, society uses stubborn to pathologize people who resist control. Okay. Yes, that's a good point. Motivationally, stubbornness is a character flaw, but to reframe that is to say persistence, or in other words, positive. So stubbornness would be negative, whereas persistence would be the positive. Would be the positive opposite of stubbornness. Persistence is a tool for consistency. And yes, living a healthy lifestyle does require consistency. So now, when you have the traditional misconception that a fat person is difficult or lazy, and then you reframe that as, they're just setting boundaries against unsolicited advice. When does a fat? Well, I guess it's sort of like, with like Alcoholics Anonymous or like rehab. The user, the drug abuser has to want to go. Like, you could drop them off at the front doorstep, and if they ask the drug abuser, "Hey, do you want rehab?" and the drug abuser says no, they're gonna turn them away regardless. Because none of it works if the person doesn't want it. So my question, that leads me to, okay, when does a fat person want advice? When does a fat person want to make a 180 and live a healthy lifestyle and get help? Because we don't live on this planet alone. You know what I mean? When I in this later adult part of my life, when I decided to live a healthy lifestyle, I guess you could say I did it on my own, but that took time, and I did seek out encouragement, if anything. Some people everybody ain't like me. Some people may just need help. Some people may need encouragement. Some people may need accountability. That's a big thing. I notice most people who live unhealthy lifestyles very much so resist accountability for their unhealthy lifestyles, and that's the disease. That's not the symptom. Avoidance of accountability is not a symptom. That's a disease. Fuck that. But when does When does a fat person solicit advice and let their boundaries down to get help, or to get accountability and consistency and encouragement, you know what I mean, in order to live a healthy lifestyle, in order to not buy those groceries in the aisles and shop around the refrigerator and the produce? you know what I mean? Like when does that occur? When does that occur? So the key insight here is stubbornness is a symptom, not a disease, right? We talked about that. The real progress, whether biological or emotional, only happens when dignity and autonomy are prioritized over judgment and control. So basically, that's saying it's just up to them. You got to let a fat person be fat at the end of the day. When they have dignity and autonomy. Now, the thing is about unsolicited advice or concern trolling or the group project that they didn't sign up for, right? These kind of things, this kind of external pressure. When you've made a commitment to live a healthy lifestyle and someone in your life is close to you, and you know them personally, or you know them well enough on a level to where you can speak to them about certain topics, right? How do you go about watching them eat what they shouldn't be eating and not say anything? How do you do that? How do you go about, hey, I'm not even going, fuck the gym. Hey, I just invested in a walking treadmill. I just invested in a food scale, a kitchen food scale, so I can measure my portions and my grams and my macros, right? And then they look at you like, oh, word, wow, that's cool. Do your thing. You know what I mean? And then how do you just not say nothing to them? And you see, like, eventually that relationship is gonna fissure, if you will. That relationship is gonna split. You'll say, y'all gonna have to go y'all separate ways. And then what if it's family? You know what I'm saying? What if it's family? Children, this is another thing too. A child isn't the one buying the groceries. The child isn't the one cooking the food, preparing the food. You know what I mean? So they only eating what's available to them. You know what I mean? And so now, are you gonna concern troll a child? But of course, they're a minor. They're not responsible. So you have to concern troll the parent, if you will. You know what I mean? Because it's the parent who's the one buying the food. It's the parent who's the one preparing the food. You know what I'm saying? And buying the snacks and filling up the cupboard. You know what I mean? So, and this is what I want to get into next, is the addiction to sugar. Because one of the people who commented on my Facebook, they were like, no, fat people aren't stubborn. They just have an addiction. And I was like, addiction to what? They said addiction to sugar. You know, so that's a whole nother deep dive I want to get into. But yeah, a child, you can't, how do you not say something? How do you not say something? If you live a healthy lifestyle and you're doing something for yourself, and you know what I'm saying? And you're getting all those benefits of the healthy lifestyle, and here is this person in your life, family or friend, and you're watching them, you know what I'm saying, just waddle away at life. How do you not say anything? How? Put it in the comments. Let me know and help me out. Give me unsolicited advice.